Baruch Shechianu. Welcome everyone to the new podcast, TheTruth.Law. My name is Rabbi Abramowitz. I hail from Manhattan, New York. That's where I was born. I was raised in Brooklyn. I traveled a lot as a kid. My parents traveled very, very often. We didn't stay in one place for more than a few months. Little background for myself is my parents had disabilities, and my brothers and I, we were 10 months apart, and we grew up as a close-knit family. However, there were very real struggles. My parents had difficulty raising us because we were born in such close succession to each other. When I was 2 years old, I have another brother who was 3, another brother 4, another brother 5. And my parents were emotionally disabled. They were unable to really take care of us. And my grandparents caught on to that, and they had us put into foster homes. At the time, my parents didn't want us in foster homes. I was put into a home of a Hasidic family at 3 years old, and my parents hired a cab service and picked us up one by one, and then took us all to Mexico. And in Mexico, we were homeless. We were living in a park. My father had a little bit of money, and with that little bit of money, he wanted to purchase a place for us. And he brought me to the house which he said he purchased. And he happened to have jumped a gate, and I was 3 years old at the time. But I remember this dog came, attacked him, and there's blood everywhere, and he was devouring his flesh, and the people came running out of the house, and they began bandaging his house. My father was screaming, "This is my house. I paid for this house. I paid my last dollar for this house." And the family said, "Sir, this is not your house." So it happened to be my father was conned, and from that point on, we couldn't really stay where we were. We had no food. We had no money. We were homeless. My parents then jumped into a cab and put it on a meter to go from Mexico to New Jersey. When we showed up to my grandparents' house in New Jersey, my grandparents came down, and the cab driver was demanding the several $1,000s of the meter ride from Mexico to New Jersey, which my grandparents had to pay for. My grandfather was the rabbinical leader of North Jersey, Union City, Bergen County, and he had to pay all that, all those funds in order to pay for that cab service. And then my parents and my brothers and I, we were staying with my grandparents, and it was very difficult because here my grandfather was the rabbinical leader, and we didn't know about Judaism. We weren't even wearing any head covering. And there was a lot of friction in the house. My mother didn't want to stay there anymore, and we started moving around a lot. My parents put us into a public school, and my friends in the public school asked me, "What religion are you? Are you Christian? Are you Catholic? Are you Protestant?" And I didn't know what to respond. I went back home, asked my parents, what should I respond? When I'm asked, what religion am I? And my mother said, say you're secular. So that's what I said. I kept on saying I'm secular. But here I was in an all African American school. My brothers and I were the only white Jewish students, although I didn't know what Judaism meant at the time. I had become friends with a group of neo-Nazis, and there was actually one time when we were going out to Playland, and we were on a roller coaster, and my neo-Nazi friend's brother called over and said, hey, you have a Jew sitting next to you. Why don't you throw him off the ride? And my friend kind of looked at me, and he was thinking, hey, maybe that's not a bad idea. But then he looked over to me and said, hey, you're not so bad. And although when I was walking with this neo-Nazi through the streets of the all African-American area, he would carry on and bang on the walls and scream out Heil Hitler. And, there was an African-American friend, a girl, a friend who was in my class at the time, who screamed out, Hitler was a demon. How could you be saying that? And he said, why are you hanging out with Calvin? That's my English name. Calvin's Jewish. And this neo-Nazi turned over to me and he said, yeah, but Calvin's a good guy. And here, the African-American knew I was Jewish, and the neo-Nazi knew I was Jewish, but I myself didn't know what Judaism was. I went back home, and I started pleading with my parents to help me understand what Judaism is, because that's what my fellow classmates were calling me. And my parents didn't want me to have anything to do with Judaism, I guess because of that friction with a family who had put us into foster homes, and of that whole relationship. My parents cut themselves off from their entire family, and wanted us just to think that we're secular, and that's our religion, being secular. But yet the other groups in the neighborhood knew that we were Jewish. I think it was clearly obvious with the name like Kaddish Abramowitz. Abramowitz sounds quite Jewish. So it happened to be years had gone by. We moved to Jamaica in Queens, and we lived on Guy Brewer's Boulevard, and it was quite a dangerous neighborhood, and we were going to an all African American school. There was a 15-year-old in my class who I had gotten into a fist fight with, and he nearly took out my eye. I was almost blinded in one eye after a fist fight, and I came home to my mother, and I said, look, I need to start going to yeshiva. Look what's going on. I'm nearly blind. And she said, well, that could have happened in yeshiva too. Then I decided on my own to attend Sunday school. Now, Sunday school, they started with the alphabet of Judaism, which is the Aleph Beis, and I began learning how to write the Aleph Beis and how to read Aleph Beis, and that's where it all started. And then I went back to my brothers to teach them the Aleph Beis, and there was one night where it was right before Passover, and I had written down the Aleph Beis, Aleph through Tuf. That's all the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis, which I had recently learned, and I taught it over to my brother in one night, and he learned the entire alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, in one night. And then from that time, I was learning and I was teaching. I was learning and then I was teaching. I kept on going back and forth from that Sunday school and going back to my brothers, and then I started being able to formulate the letters into words. I wrote down Coca-Cola, and I kind of wanted my brothers to get jealous. Look, I can do something you can't. I can write Coca-Cola in Hebrew. And they were all impressed by that, and they were trying to write that on their own. And little by little, they began learning that on their own. I had learned how to recite sanctification over wine Friday night, called Kiddush. And I called over my grandmother, and I was so proud of myself that I was able to recite that. And I said it over that recitation of the sanctification of wine from beginning to end. There was some sort of party, and I was able to say it in front of the whole Sunday school with my grandmother in attendance. And once my grandmother saw that, I was asking my grandmother, I was saying, look, I want to continue learning and I want to go to a yeshiva. And she said, no, it's too difficult because of the background of the past. Stay where you are. And then I asked my mother, I was pleading with her, please send me to a yeshiva so I can learn Hebrew. And then, we were, at the time, we were living in a one-bedroom apartment. My brothers and I had mattresses in the living room, dining room, all just scattered on the floor. And my parents would either sleep on the couch or sleep on the mattresses with us or go into their room. But there was one room in the back, and I locked the room, and I opened up a Bible for the first time, and I read in Hebrew, Bereshis bara Elokim, Hashem created the world. And I reasoned to myself, if Hashem could create the world, then he could allow me this instruction to know and to perform. And he could allow me to learn the alphabet of the Hebrew letters and be able to formulate those words and be able to learn his instruction and his law. And slowly, that's exactly what happened. God directed me, and he was able to guide me to be able to keep these commandments and to learn more and more about these commandments. And it was all in baby steps. I was 10 years old at the time. My older brother was 9 months older than me. He was 11. Then I had a brother older than him who was 12. And then my oldest brother was a few months older than him, was 13. And we had all been living a secular lifestyle. We didn't know what Judaism was. We didn't know we barely knew what a yarmulke was, which is a head covering. We didn't know what Sabbath was, which was Shabbos. We didn't know the difference between kosher, non-kosher. We knew very, very little. I knew just the amount of what kosher is to tell the school lunch teacher to make me peanut butter and jelly because I didn't want to eat meat. I wanted to try to keep kosher. And I would never eat that meat. I would never eat things which I thought wouldn't be conducive to consuming for somebody of my persuasion. But I really didn't know Judaism. I didn't know what it all meant. And then there was a time of Passover where my parents decided to go to a Holiday Inn somewhere in the middle of Philadelphia, and we didn't have, kosher food. The only thing we had were vegetables, and my brothers and I sort of saw from movies what a Seder was like. So we took like coconuts and we cut it in half, and we were preparing a Seder for ourselves right there in the hotel. But other than that, I wouldn't eat anything that wasn't kosher for Passover, because I saw in the local shop, right, that they had a kosher Passover section. So I knew how important it was, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it all meant. Then I demanded from my parents that they send me to yeshiva. There was constant fighting. I was always constantly being turned down. They wouldn't allow me to attend a place where I can learn instruction of the law and of God, and to further know about Judaism. And it got to a point where I would go into the bathroom, lock the door, and I would cry to God, and I wouldn't stop crying, and I wouldn't stop speaking to God. And in that place, I spoke to God very often to get me out of this situation, to bring me to a place where I can learn Hebrew, where I can further learn His instruction, His Torah. And God answered me. Through those tears, God answered me. And after that Sunday school, I didn't convince my parents, but I convinced my grandmother to try to direct me to yeshiva. And I just went on my own, and my brothers followed. And from there, we started continuing on that path. And the first place that we went was a Chabad camp called Gan Yisrael. That's run by United Lubavitch. And then we were veered to the Lubavitcher High School. And it was interesting because I was about 12 years old, and I was being pushed to a Lubavitcher High School because my brothers were all so close in age that they felt that I needed to be with my brothers. But after those 2 years of Lubavitch High School, my brothers went to a rabbinical high school in Baltimore called Ner Yisrael, and I was younger, so they didn't allow me to go with them. I went to Yeshiva University, which is high school in Manhattan, and that's where I spent my last remaining years of high school. And then I decided I wanted to go to Israel. And I went to Israel on my own for the very first time. It was a kind of a difficult period in my home because my parents had given birth to 2 more children. And I was constantly taking care of the house and taking care of those children, my young brother and sister. And it was very difficult for me. So I decided I would want to move somewhere else on my own, and I moved to Israel. And in Israel, I started college. I went to a Beis Medrash, which was a higher rabbinical study, and I also joined the army at the time. It was the Gulf War. And I was sitting in Machane Hanan in Jericho while the missiles were being sent by Saddam Hussein of Iraq who was threatening to burn all of Israel. And I was sitting there in Jericho surrounded by 500 million Arabs who wake up every morning swearing to kill me. But yet I was sitting there surrounded by 500 million Arabs, and yet I was safe. That's where I started understanding that God is keeping his promise. God had promised through the Bible that you're going to walk through the covenant of parts. You're going to walk through surrounded by all these vicious animals who want to kill you, yet you're going to be safe. And that's exactly what I experienced when I came back from there, from Israel. I continued on my university studies, Yeshiva University. After graduating from Yeshiva University, I still wanted to continue my Torah studies, and I continued on for many years after that. I went to Rabbinical College, the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem, and from that time, I continued the studies of the laws that Hashem has given us. And after getting married and having children, I decided I wanted to, give over the blessings that I've received to give it over to others. And I contacted this very generous and very helpful organization called URA, and I asked them for a Torah partner. And I said I want a partner that I can grow with. I can get to know their family. I could be supportive of the entire family. And I didn't hear from them from several months, and they finally called me back, and they said, we have somebody perfect for you. He's 93 years old, and he's never been married and has no family or children. And I thought they were playing a practical joke. How can you set me up with an older person when I specifically said I wanted to have a study partner who I can influence not only him, but the children and family? And not that I have anything against older 90-year-olds. I have a study partner till this day every morning. He's 97 years old, and he's one of my best study partners. But I waited a few months after that, and this organization then called me back and said, we finally have somebody perfect for you. He has a family just like you asked for. He has a very dedicated and loving wife. He has children. And I was so excited. I'm going to finally start learning Torah with this study partner. And then they said, and he's not Jewish. And I thought this was an office prank, and for some reason they had been mocking me and playing a practical joke. And I could already imagine, the whole office laughing. But they were serious. They had said that you're learning with a non-Jew. And he has a family. The wife is a Syrian Jew. The children are all Jewish. And his father's Jewish. And I asked them, how could I learn with a non-Jew? There is prohibitions to missionize non-Jews. We're not supposed to teach Torah to non-Jews. But, of course, if a non-Jew wants to learn Torah, we sort of instruct them not to, because there are laws that they are qualified to learn and to know which is the 7 universal laws called the 7 Noah laws, or the 7 category of laws that they should know. But as far as Judaism, we don't teach and we don't go out and missionize the Torah to non-Jews. So I asked, how can we do that? How can I learn with a non-Jew? And what the organization said is that they got a special dispensation from the leading rabbinical authority of the time, Moshe Feinstein, that you could learn with a non-Jew as long as they have influence to their family. And here, this non-Jew that I was set to learn with had Jewish children and a Jewish wife and a Jewish father. So they thought I can influence not only him, but all of the family. And it happened to be that I've been learning with this family now for almost 10 years. And by the second year, the father, who was Jewish but not a practicing Jew, and not only that, he was anti-Jewish law. He didn't even want his children or his grandchildren to have circumcision. And after 2 years of study with my Torah partner, his father even became the godfather or the sandak of the circumcision. So I saw that this family was being positively influenced by the Torah instruction. And not only that, the Torah partner I was learning with had started sending his children to yeshivas, to Jewish schools. And it was going into such a positive direction, but I was still learning with a non-Jew. And about 3 years into the study partner, I had been studying Torah consecutively on Thursday nights. And then I was studying with my partner. And then all of a sudden, somebody grabs a hold of the phone. And I'm speaking to my Torah partner from New Jersey. My Torah partner lived at the time in Tampa, Florida. And somebody else grabbed a hold of the phone and started crying. And he said, your Torah partner is not even Jewish, and he's so inspired by this Torah instruction. And he said, I am from Lakewood. He's calling from Tampa. He said, I am from Lakewood, and when I left Lakewood, I threw away my tefillin. I stopped keeping Shabbos. I stopped keeping Judaism. I even married a non-Jew and had non-Jewish children. But he said, I'm so inspired by your Torah partner, who's not Jewish, that I'm taking upon myself not only to start keeping Shabbos again, but to start wearing tefillin again. So you see how this Torah partnership between a Jew and a non-Jew can really enrich people's lives. And that's why I intend, together with my Torah partner, Noel Flasserstein, to teach the truth of the Torah, the TheTruth.Law. These 7 Noahide laws are so important that it could repair all of humanity. It could bring enrichment in society. It can bring people to harmony just by studying these laws. That's why it's so important. The first law that we're going to focus on is the law of idolatry, to not have any other God. God is one, and we learn that God supersedes any other form or power. And those are the things that we're going to focus on. Continuing on to my journey through Judaism, I've seen that Judaism has an enrichment that can affect not only Jews but non-Jews. And non-Jews have their place, and non-Jews in times of the Bible would bring sacrifices to the Holy Temple. And in Sukkot, when we brought 70 sacrifices for the 70 nations, not only did it increase the harmony of the world, it increased the wealth of the world. And that's what we intend to do with TheTruth.Law. We intend to give over this truth that has been hidden and needs to be revealed and needs to be studied. And this truth could help harmony, wealth, and happiness. And we should all continue to learn together, to grow our relationships with each other. And I thank you all for being here on this introduction to the podcast. And I hope we can delve into the 7 categories of laws together in the future.